Greetings, everybody. It is Silver Thunder coming back at you, the extraordinarily ordinary gaming squirrel, and today we're going to be taking down a tempered Rey Dau, one of my personal favorite monsters from Monster Hunter Wilds. Not necessarily the most difficult fight, I would say, but one that is pretty memorable. I really enjoy it, so without further ado, we will go ahead and get into the hunt here. And whilst I am hunting, I had an idea for a discussion today, maybe a little bit more laid back as compared to some of the heavier topics we've been getting into lately, and that is the thoughts of the most unforgettable boss fights. And unforgettable, I think, can have a broad spectrum of meanings. It could be unforgettable for different reasons. So I just decided to compile a bunch of bosses that I have fought over my many years as a gaming rodent. And yeah, we'll go ahead and list them here. And as you guys think about it, if you don't think that the boss that I will list is memorable in any particular way, or if you have a list of bosses of your own, please feel free to throw them in the comments below. I'm really curious to see what you guys think. But firstly, the very first boss that I remember really impacting me whenever I was a little kid, all of those years ago, was on the original PlayStation 1. Whenever I was playing Spyro the Dragon, the very first one, probably one of the most influential video games of all time for me, if not the most influential, because that is really the one that got me into gaming overall, however many years ago it was. And I remember coming up on the first boss in the Artisan Kingdom, and that was against the good old Toastmeister himself. You know, the environment was so much different from the rest of the home world. It was actually a spooky sunset. The music was kind of foreboding, and you know, you have those like creepy looking dogs, and you know, those low poly dogs that come and like squish you and are super fast, more difficult than any of the enemies that you had faced before. So I was terrified to see what was going to be at the end of the level. I remember trying to pass it off to my father to try to beat him, but luckily, if I remember correctly, my father told me to stick with it, persevere, and I'm thankful that I did, because, you know, it's funny because my kits will do the same thing to me whenever they're facing a scary enemy. Actually, my oldest daughter will do that. She kind of gets scared by video game bosses and things like that, and will often try to pass the controller to me or her little sister, funnily enough. But yeah, very impactful on me, you know, kind of like the first boss fight that I really ever fought. Maybe besides Bowser and Super Mario Brothers, but, you know, very good core memory, although I was terrified at the time. And I guess kind of continuing the history of Silver Thunder's gaming career, the next boss that I really remember being super impactful was next on the PlayStation 2. That's right, I was a PlayStation shill, as it were, for the first few years of my gaming career, gaming life, and it was from Kingdom Hearts 1, and I think you guys probably will already know what boss I'm talking about before I even say it, but it was my very first taste of what a difficult boss could be. You know, I had kind of grown, I kind of took to gaming pretty well, not necessarily saying I'm the best player in the whole wide world, but you know, I was able to figure things out and put two and two together, and I guess also the kids games that I played, like Spyro, didn't really have that many of challenging bosses. Maybe Crash Bandicoot might be an exception, but Kingdom Hearts, you know, mostly an easy-ish game, I would say. You know, if young Silver Thunder was able to play it, and my human avatar was also able to play it as well, then, you know, most likely it was on the easy side of things. Well, and there's also difficulty modes in that game as well. But my first wall of the boss was most assuredly Sephiroth in the Olympic Coliseum. man, he drove me to new heights of aggravation and frustration. I felt like that his sword is a mile long. He was so fast, and basically the only way that I was really able to get out of that fight was spamming ethers and max ethers, which, for those of you who don't know, in Kingdom Hearts, that restores both your health and your magic. And I just remember, like, also constantly spamming Cure, Curaga, whatever the most powerful spell is in Kingdom Hearts for healing. I can't. It's been a long time since I played those games. Honestly, I ought to go back, revisit my childhood, my kithood. But yeah, I just remember Sephiroth being one of the more difficult bosses, and possibly preparing myself in the future to play Monster Hunter and Soulsborne games in terms of boss difficulty. So yeah, first taste of it, I eventually won. I never gave up. I eventually won. I think I had, if I remember correctly, I had beaten every single boss in Kingdom Hearts, including like the more punishing secret ones, like the one in Agrabah and things. But yeah, Sephiroth definitely stood out to me. But in terms of my childhood, so we're kind of pivoting directions, not necessarily looking at a difficult boss, but another boss that was pretty memorable for me, that wasn't necessarily difficult. In fact, it was kind of a glorified turret segment, as well as like a major platforming challenge. Was from the original Sly Cooper, the final battle with Clockwork. Oh, by the way, I meant to throw out a spoiler warning, you know, for all the games that we are talking about. A lot of these are going to be like final bosses, so you've been warned. It's a 23-year-old game, and sorry, I just spoiled the final boss. But yeah, final boss is Clockwork in that game, and I don't know, there's just something about it that just gave me such an epic feeling. You know, the music was really cool, and you know, the emotional stakes are pretty high because, you know, Clockwork had been like the rival of the Cooper gang, and you had been kind of seeing him in the background of things. Pieces are getting put together, you know, how Clockwork had been like influencing everything, and you're kind of seeing the plot kind of coming to a close. And I love the Sly Cooper games overall, so that I felt like that was a very appropriate finale, especially the final like platforming challenge of the boss. I think was a super appropriate thing. We really, you know, of all the remasters, kind of going on a tangent for a sec, of all the remasters that are coming out nowadays, if there are any games that are begging for that, it is the Sly Cooper original trilogy. Never played the fourth one, but yeah, that would be a game that would perform so well with a remaster. So yeah, Sucker Punch, if you're listening to this and you haven't already been screamed at by many YouTubers over this, remake the Sly Cooper games, hashtag 2026. Maybe there is one in progress, I don't know. Sometimes I tend to be out of the loop of things. You know, you only hear so much when you're all the way out here in the forest. But regardless, moving on, kind of going a little bit further into the future, another boss fight that was memorable for me, but not necessarily for a positive reason, but it was memorable for being one of the most anticlimactic, if I can spit it out, boss fights, was Lucian from Fable 2. Now, that is an interesting entry in the game series. That's when I kind of stopped my PlayStation chilling days and had sold out to the Xbox 360 because I really wanted to play Halo 3, and I really wanted to see what I was missing in some of the other Xbox exclusives. So, yeah, I was a 360 kit before I ever got a PS3. I had jumped off the Sony boat at that point, but yeah, it was Fable 2 is one of my favorites on the Xbox 360. I really enjoy like that fantasy life simulation aspect of it, and it wasn't too difficult of a game for me to play through. But yeah, that final arc, if I remember correctly, whenever you're like going to face Lucino, the bad guy that kind of, you know, that set everything in motion, you know, was trying to destroy all of Albion while thinking that he's saving it, you know, classic villain trope, or quote-unquote sympathetic villain trope. You know, you think you're going to have a final confrontation with them, and you can just basically shoot him while he's monologuing. In fact, I think eventually, if you don't shoot him while he's monologuing, then one of the other characters that's there with you will just pop a cap at him, and he falls to his untimely demise. Either way. So, yeah, I remember I felt kind of gypped at the time. I was like, wait a minute, this is it? I played this game for all this hours, and that's it? It's kind of like one of the first times, I don't know. I feel like that was my first taste of, like, I don't want to sound too pretentious, but like modern game design, and modern, I guess, like story tropes and conventions and things like that. That was like my first taste of that. Little did I know that things like that would be a sign of things to come. There were other games that had anticlimactic fights and bosses and things like that, but that one really did stand out to me in particular. I have to say, though, as we're getting closer to the end of this hunt, I have to talk about my two favorite boss fights of all time, specifically final boss fights. Once again, spoilers for both of these games. I really could not pick between the two of these, and they're not necessarily the most difficult final bosses, but very memorable to me. Firstly, absolutely loved Pokemon whenever I was a kid. And getting to the end of Pokemon Yellow and facing the Elite Four, you know, the super high level Pokemon, because, you know, that was back when Pokemon actually did have a degree of difficulty and you actually had to grind in order to meet your goals. Totally whiffed that boulder right there, by the way. But you know, you've reached the end, you're going through the Elite Four, you know, you even beat Lance and you think, okay, you know, that's over. But then all of a sudden, your rival Gary, as I often named him because, you know, I like the Pokemon anime, you know, he's there and his team is like super high powered, and you're seeing like the culmination of this antagonist that you've been going up against this entire game. And finally it's coming to a climactic end as you dueling starters, essentially. And if I recall correctly, I think in that game, of course, you at Pokemon Yellow, you had Pikachu. I think the rival had Eevee, if I remember correctly. But yeah, that's just so good. And you could take that and apply that to like Red and Blue, respectively. But Yellow is what I had when I was a kid. So I don't know, it was just the epic feeling, the epic music. That was my first taste of a really, really awesome final boss. And I don't know, it just stands out to be one of my favorites to this very day. And the last one, truly epic final boss for me. I will not spoil it because if you have not played Persona 4, it would ruin the entire plot of the game if I gave away the final boss. But just know, oh my gosh, Persona 4, what a game. I remember playing it in college, and just the final boss of it, mechanically intensive, but also it really depended on like the social links and the investment of your friendships throughout the entire game. It just all comes to an amazing conclusion. That's just fantastic. I highly recommend that you play Persona 4 if you have not. But those of you who know, you know what I mean. Well, that is going to do it for this hunt. That is one Rey Dau in the bag, and we'll be moving on to a Call of Duty next week. But I want to thank you guys very much for joining me in playing Monster Hunter Wilds. I'm very excited to see what the expansion is going to be, and I will keep you guys posted with that. And I might even stream whenever the expansion comes out. We will have to see. But yeah, let me know your thoughts below. Please like, subscribe, pass the videos on as well to others if you like my content, so that way you can see more of it. Well, this has been Silver Thunder, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Take care, everybody.